I'm joined today by Duncanville head basketball coach and state champion, David Peavy. And Coach Peavy, I'm curious to know what your personal experiences have been dealing with either unconstitutional nonviolent police harassment or unconstitutional non-lethal police brutality.
A lot. I mean, it unfortunately it's kind of a norm. It's kind of been expected. I grew up. Growing up, I lived two different lives. First part of my growing up, I lived in what you would consider the hood. I grew up all black and Mexican neighborhood on the northwest side of San Antonio. And then about halfway through my childhood, I moved to Alamo Heights, which is complete opposite. If you live in Dallas, it's kind of like Highland Park. In Houston, it would be, well, if you're in Austin, it would be like a Westlake or Lake Travis area. In Houston, it would be like Lamar or what Pete, you know Houston a little bit better than me.
It doesn't really have a direct comparison to Heights, Westlake, or Highland Park. River Oaks is the wealthy neighborhood.
River Oaks, okay, yeah, more like
all of the white people there send their kids to private schools.
Yeah. So I went from having one white kid in my class to being the only black kid in the school. When I was in the fifth grade, I was the only black kid in the entire school in my elementary school. And then going through high school, I was one of three black people that graduated in my class. So two different worlds, and the racism I saw was, it was by police officers was, you have to understand, I was an athlete. And so all these police officers knew who I was. They were the police officers that worked our games, so they knew who I was. But I got pulled over I mean, I say every time, but because, that's how you remember things. But I remember going to parties in high school, and when one party would get broken up, everybody would meet up at Circle K and then decide where we were going next. And the police knew that, so they would all show up at Circle K. And I remember every time I could drive in high school. I had my own car, and whoever was in my car with me would always get out of my car and get in somebody else's car once we got to Circle K, because they knew I was going to get pulled over. So, once everybody decided where everybody was going, all the cars would leave and the police would pull me over. It seemed like every single time. We had a relationship. I had a relationship. Those police officers knew who I was. I knew who they were. I never got, beat down or anything like that, but it was harassing. It was harassing. But I got I had to deal with that a whole lot in high school. Getting pulled over just randomly outside of Alamo Heights area because of my color or race. I don't have too many encounters of that, but of course, yeah, it's happened. Getting pulled over for no reason at all. Going 3 miles over the speed limit. Just trying to figure out, hey, you mind if I search your car? Running my license to see if I had any warrants. Luckily I didn't have any. But it was definitely a problem.
Yeah, and of course, they ask to search white people's cars sometimes as well. But I can speak from personal experience. If my car's messy and my hair's longer or not combed, and I got kind of a straggly beard, or maybe I'm wearing a tank top or something like that, they're going to be more likely to ask to search my car. But if I'm clean shaven, my haircut's looking good, and my car's clean, they never ask. And we go back a long time, and you don't keep your car like a pigsty like I do, right? And so it's like a white person who's been and I do consider it to be um, unconstitutional harassment for them to ask a whole bunch of questions they have. Most like they're trying to manufacture probable cause, and I'm totally against that. The difference is that I can comb my hair and shave and clean my car, and you can't change your circumstances to avoid police harassment the way that a white person can. I just wanted to point that out for the white people watching who are like, well, they've asked me to search also, because
Right.
a lot of white folks want to say, well, that's happened to me, so that can't possibly be racist. And so my next question is, Coach, of your closest circle of black friends in our basic age group, roughly what percent of them have had either experience with unconstitutional nonviolent harassment or unconstitutional non-lethal brutality?
I mean, I haven't asked everybody, but I would be shocked if it wasn't 100%. I would like to think, or I would guess, everybody that I know, black men for sure, have dealt with the same type of harassment. Um, getting pulled over, getting questioned, um, illegally searched. I would say probably 100% in our lifetime.
And so that's been mostly my experience as well. I now, through these interviews, have had, this is not our first conversation about the topic of racism. And so I've been having conversations with black friends of mine for years. But in terms of like formally asking this specific question, I do have two black friends in my age group who've never been pulled over unconstitutionally. Never been, they're walking to the park and the cop rolls up and demands to see everybody's ID. That kind of stuff that is common. But we're talking about two out of, at this point, like 60. Right? So,
Yeah.
58. So you said 100%. My experience of doing kind of a more formal survey is that it's, more like 96%. Right. And which in 96, by the way, just for the viewers, because I don't know if you know this or not, but in 2014, Reuters published an article where they interviewed 25 black police officers in New York. And 24 of the 25 reported being harassed when they were off duty. So we're talking about 96% of cops, black cops, off duty, got harassed. And obviously, the way too many white people like to make excuses when this happens. Oh, well, he was dressed like a thug, or he was sagging his pants, or he was this or that. And it just needs to be said that police departments have pretty strict grooming policies. So it's not like the black police officers in New York had, massive dreadlocks and, all that type of thing. And yet it didn't happen. And to be very clear, a white kid with a Grateful Dead sticker has constitutional rights. A black kid with dreads has constitutional rights. So I'm in no way, shape, or form justifying the police harassing black people based on attire or based on hairstyle preferences. In no way, shape, or form am I defending that. I'm simply mentioning that because that's the reflexive reaction of a lot of white people. Is they go, well, what was he? They always want to try to find an excuse. And that's why I like to tell the story about the police officers. Because again, 96% of black police officers in New York, not Alabama, not Mississippi, not the Florida Panhandle. We always try to make it into a regional problem as well.
Right.
It happens in Chicago, and they go, that doesn't happen here. That's a Tennessee problem, And so I always like to point that out. And so my last follow-up question here, and it's a ridiculous one, but of course it's a ridiculous topic, the extent to which white people continually insist that these issues are isolated. And we as white people chronically refuse to connect the interwoven culture that permits unconstitutional nonviolent harassment with the brutality and the murder. And you have to connect the culture because one can't exist without the other.
Right.
And looking at these things collectively as they properly should be, do you consider this to be an isolated problem, or would you call it more on the pervasive side?
It's definitely not isolated. I mean, you're hitting it on the head, and with everything going on right now, it baffles me some of the things that I hear white people say. Um, I mean, it's just crazy to have everything out there in front of you, to get all the to see all the videos, to see to have all the evidence in front of you, and for white people to continue to say the things that they say. Well, if he wasn't doing this, well, if he wasn't doing that, all he had to do was listen and do what he was told. It's crazy to me. But you know, I think more and more people speaking out, uh, choosing a side. You know, I think that's huge for us right now. Choose a side. You know, either you're on this side or you're on that side, and get out of the middle, and just call it what it is. And if you're completely against, that's fine. I'd rather you do that than be in the middle. But I think things are going to get better. You know, I think as we see right now, things might get a little bit worse before they get better. But these tough conversations that we're having, um, you know, in the times that we're living in right now, I have to have hope, and I have to believe that things are about to get better. You know, for our kids and for their kids, that they can live in a time where, you know, there's going to be racism. You know, there's always going to be racism, but you know, the one thing that we're focused on right now is police officers, the ones that are supposed to protect. You know, getting rid of racism within the police department, to where, you know, I think it all connects. You know, a lot of white people, racist white people, talk about how many black people kill black people. You know, how many black people are in jail, or in prisons. You know, and I think that's, you know, as far as the black people killing black people, you know, black people, there's not all black people are good black people. You know, it's like all white people aren't good white people. You know, we're not sitting here fighting against you know, saying, you know, that's just the thing going on right now. The Black Lives Matter. Well, you know, blacks are killing blacks. We know that. You know, that's not our argument right now. You know, yes, that's some things we got to deal with. But as far as the unfair treatment that we receive from from the police officers and the justice system, you know, uh, something needs to change quickly. You know, it needs to change. Um, Overpopulation of black people, this disproportionate number of blacks in prison. Well, I mean, I think when you have black people getting pulled over at a much higher rate than white people for doing nothing, then yeah, when police officers pull them over and now they find stuff on them, sure. Well, they just didn't pull over white people for no reason and find stuff on them. And you know, it all, now you can go back and say, well, the black people shouldn't have been doing anything wrong. You're right, they shouldn't have. But you know, the problem is the racism in police, in the police force. You know, it's got to change. But you know, we can go on and on talking about, you know, we can go days talking about, you know, things that need to change. You know, you and I grew up, or you spent some time in Alamo Heights. You know what things are like. You know what things are like, and you know, and it's a great community. Unbelievable. It was a great place to grow up, but you know, there were definitely some racial issues, and there are today. I saw a video yesterday on the internet about I think it was the cheerleaders at Alamo Heights. I didn't get a chance to really watch it. It was late when I saw it. So you know, it's a great place to live. It's safe for the most part, but for people that look like me, it wasn't always. Uh, it wasn't always a great place to live for somebody that looks like me.
Well, you brought up a lot of interesting points on the over policing of black people, using Dallas as an example. If the police do a sweep through a government subsidized housing unit by Fair Park and arrest 25 black kids for smoking weed while not doing a sweep through SMU and not arresting 25 white kids for smoking weed, did the white kids not commit a criminal act? And that's really the exact thing that you were saying. If
Right.
they pulled over white people at random and badgered them and bullied them and shined the light in the back seat and asked a bunch of questions and mistook, like most of the black people I know, when they get pulled over by the police, they're making sure their hands show and they're more than a little bit nervous. So the police assume that the nervousness is evidence of criminality, when actually the nervousness is well warranted based on 400 years of American policing toward black people. And I would love for the Supreme Court to speak on that a black person being nervous during a traffic stop is not probable cause. And the Supreme Court's made a lot of unfortunate decisions here. And then the other thing, talking about rights, like we as white people need to quit looking at these situations. Well, why didn't he comply? Well, we as white people don't take kindly to our constitutional rights being violated.
Right.
Look at all the videos on YouTube of the, am I being detained? Am I free to go? White people just verbally abusing police officers based on their perception of their own constitutional rights.
Right.
And so, yeah, those white people weren't compliant, but they didn't wind up with the shit beat out of them or murdered. And black rights need to matter, or black lives are never going to matter in this narrow topic. And so it's like, why is a black person not totally deferential when the police are flagrantly in the process of violating their rights? Why should they? Why should any American citizen be deferential in the face of police officers abusing the Constitution, a document that they swore to uphold and protect? That's not the American way. We're not supposed to be docile in the face of the government abusing our constitutional rights, but somehow, some way, we keep expecting you guys to be docile, even though we never would be. You know, we stormed the Capitals about wearing masks, which aren't even mentioned in the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, whereas you guys are occasionally uncooperative when the police are trying to violate your Fourth Amendment rights and your First Amendment rights and your Second Amendment rights. And why should you cooperate with the government violating your rights? Like, that's such an unreasonable expectation. And then on the black on black crime thing, one, we got to notice the context is always in the context of distracting attention away from yet another police officer. You never see Fox News running fundraisers for the many good organizations fighting violence in the South Side of Chicago. Right? They never do a fundraiser for that. They just want to say, oh, the real problem is black on black crime. And speaking of the context, the analogy I use, and I wrote about this in the book, the massacre in Dallas, where the 5 or 6 police officers were just straight up executed by a psychopath who was not affiliated with that rally in any way, shape, or form. But he went to the rally knowing cops would be there. He went there to kill cops indiscriminately, and in my view, indefensibly. Well, imagine if immediately after that, I went on TV and said, you know, it's a tragedy that these 5 officers lost their lives, but hundreds of police officers lose their life every year in vehicular safety related issues. But no one wants to talk about that. Like, how come no one's talking about vehicular safety? That's mathematically a much bigger problem. So I guess blue lives don't matter then. I guess blue lives only matter in this one. Well, if I talked like that, would you assume that I was on the side of the 5 murdered officers? Or would you think I was on the side of the motherfucker who did the murder?
No question.
So when we come with black on black crime, what we're really doing is saying, we don't give a fuck about George Floyd. We're on the side of the white racist lyncher, whose name I prefer not to even use. And so, you know, it's, and then the other thing is, again, when you connect the issues, it's like something like 0.34% of black people in an annual year have an experience dealing with black on black violent crime, right? Be that an assault or on robbery or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The list of violent crimes. About 0.34% of black people annually in the United States experience black on black violent crime versus virtually 100% of black people in the United States deal with white on black or institution on black racism in a given year at some point. So if one problem, institutional racism, white on black racism, if one problem is experienced by virtually 100% of black people in a given year, and one problem is experienced by 0.34% of black people in a given year, how in the world is it reasonable to focus on the problem that affects 0.34%?
Right.
It's the problem that affects 100%. So it's like it's insensitive, it's bigoted, and it's also mathematically totally preposterously unreasonable. So, well, Coach, I wonder what else was on your mind. We kind of started talking before the interview formally started, so
Yeah.
I'd love to get back.
One thing, man, that's hit me in the last few weeks. You know, I was at a rally, with everything going on after George Floyd, and it was crazy. On my way to the rally, which is 2 miles from the house, I get a text from a good friend of mine who is a basketball coach, black basketball coach in Austin. And he sent it to a group of black men that said, man, basically, please, let's make sure we are doing these things. And it was a list of things basically teaching our young black men, our black boys, how to deal with police officers. Basically, when you're pulled over, make sure your hands are here. Keep your license and your registration and your insurance on your visor, so your hands never have to go into a glove box. I mean, it was just a list of like 10 different things. And I'm sitting there at the rally and I'm reading my text message, listening to the rally, and I'm saying, how can people argue? How many white parents have to teach their white kids how to be white? And I'm sitting here thinking, man, I've had this conversation with my sons. I'm a basketball coach that coaches almost all black kids. I have these conversations with my players, and it's sad, but it's responsible for us black men to teach our young black men, or the black boys, how to be black. You got to know how to be black. When you get pulled over, you have to do these things to stay alive. And it just hit hard. It just hit me all at one time. Like, man, we've always done this, and it's not been a big deal. It's just been a normal thing. Yeah, teach your black kid, when he gets pulled over, make sure you answer. Make sure you yes sir, no sir, because we have to stay alive. You know, that's our number one goal for our kid, is to get home every night. And to me, as I was standing there in this rally, I just thought about, man, for the white people who think that things are fair and equal, I want to know how many of them have to have this same conversation that I have with my sons, and my players. How many of them have to do the same thing with their white sons? And you know, I could be wrong. You know, maybe they have to have the same conversation, but I'd like to. You know, I'd like to have these conversations with more white men who have sons, and see if they've had these conversations with them.
Well, I can tell you that my parents never, ever had the conversation with me. Now, what you hear a lot from white racists, and I think every white person is a racist, at least to some extent, and I include myself in that. There's just a scale to racism, like any human attribute. And I always admit to being a racist when I talk to white people, because it drops their defensiveness at least a little bit. You know, when I'm trying to engage, with my goal being to persuade white people to be a little bit more open-minded and open their eyes, or at least don't shut them so tightly. Maybe opening the eyes is an unrealistic expectation. But I hear a lot from them. My parents taught me to respect the police. And it's like, one, bullshit. Like that, no, they didn't. They never sat you down and said, "Son, gotta respect it." It's not true. I didn't. I know a lot of white people, including a lot of white racists who are more racist than I, and we've had these conversations. And when you know someone for a long time, we have mutual friends at Alamo Heights, and we go down the list. Ask Thad or Dave or Howie or Ben or any of those guys, and they're going to be honest with us whether they want to or not. And they're going to say, "No, my parents never sat me down." But I'll tell the white person who insists that they did get the talk. I'll say, well, okay, you're talking about respect. Did your parents ever teach you specifically about the importance of having your ID in a place you didn't have to reach for it, didn't have to reach under your butt to your wallet, didn't have to go to the glove box? Did they ever talk to you specifically about making sure your hands are showing? Did they ever specifically tell you to always say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, so that the cops believe that you're a docile, deferential, that you're one of the good ones? You telling me that your parents sat you down and had that specific conversation with you? Bullshit. That's not true. And a lot of white people are like, black people would teach their kids to respect them. No, the problem isn't that black people aren't having the talk. The problem is that black people still need to have the fucking talk. That's the problem. Black people are having the talk. There's no doubt about that. I don't personally know any black fathers with black sons who haven't had the talk, going through the checklist, like the text you got. So I don't have any kids that I know of, but like my white friends and myself, looking back at our, no, that never happened. There were maybe white friends of mine with the, in the military or in law enforcement themselves, maybe kind of in passing, said, always support the men in blue or something like that, maybe, but it was not like so the answer to your question is maybe some of those conversations happen generally. In this family, we respect the police, something like that. But no, like the talk with the specifics of how to make it home alive, those conversations aren't happening in white households because they're not needed in white households. And that's the problem. So.
Yep. But like I said before, man, I think there are steps being made right now that are gonna make things better. But we got a long way to go. I think once police officers get held to a different standard, when police officers start holding each other accountable and not letting other police officers do things like we're talking about right now, things will get better. But I'm just hopeful right now.
Well, so there is like the because I've been interviewing white coaches and I asked them ahead of time to literally send the same three questions I texted you about, and in our age group, like you said, it's virtually 100% of black people have had a minimum experienced unconstitutional, nonviolent police harassment. And the average of the black college kids the average seems to be in like the 65-70% range. So that's a 30+% drop on average in one generation, a quarter century. And so that is statistical evidence that some level of hope is warranted. The problem, of course, is the 65 to 70%. It's still in 2020 with college kids. It's still happening 2/3 or higher. And so my message to white people who, it's so easy for white people to say, we can cry about the past or we can celebrate the progress. Well, I'm okay people celebrating progress as long as it's a mobile celebration, not a stationary. Like, let's celebrate the progress we've made. Let's not pretend as though we've reached the finish line. And that's the problem. Again, like most of the white people who keep insisting on celebrating all the progress we've made, they're like, oh, okay, like it's fixed.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's not even close to fixed. And it's not just in policing either. You know, policing are catching the brunt of it because when a qualified black borrower gets turned down for a loan, you know, they get to go home and have dinner rather than going 6 feet in the ground.
Yeah.
And so same thing with a white landlord who refuses to rent to a black tenant on equitable terms. Well, the black tenant who's getting screwed around by that landlord, they still get to go home and have dinner with their family. And so it's the reason why the murders of unarmed black people by police get the most attention. But these problems truly are much broader than simply policing. And they sadly remain pervasive. But we are steadily, albeit way too slowly, making progress ascending Justice Mountain. It's just based on the research, we're still 155 years after the institution of slavery formally ended. We're still pretty clearly not even halfway up Justice Mountain in 155 years. So hopefully we start accelerating the pace, and it feels like, you know, and again, you don't know what it's going to look like 6 weeks from now. But I never saw over 100 police chiefs put out statements condemning a cop. I never saw that before. I never saw the leader of the Southern Baptist Convention put out a statement saying Black Lives Matter. I never saw that. You know, a lot of the college basketball coaches, some of whom are, you know, off the books, decently well documented for how they feel on the topic. And even some of those people are speaking out. Yeah. And so it's like, you know, it's like, I mean, hell, the Republicans put out a bill in the Senate. It's a watered down bill that I don't love. But one thing that my evolution as a political and policy thinker is like, I was quite upset with Barack Obama and the Democrats when they rolled out the Fair Sentencing Act, which dropped the sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine from 100 to 1 to 17 to 1. And I was kind of like, 17 to 1, that's not fucking fair. You know, like, take that moniker and shove it up your ass. Well, I've evolved, right? Like if you try to continually better yourself, and what I realized is that was the best that they could get through.
Right.
And 83% progress is huge. And Barack Obama and every Democrat who fought for that and voted for it did a good thing. You know, it wasn't as good as I would have preferred, but politics is often about pragmatism and what's possible, you know. And so I look at the GOP bill in the Senate and it doesn't go far enough. But if they wrote it, I know that they'll vote for it. Right. And it's certainly better than nothing. But the key is, in my mind anyway, okay, so that's a good first step. What's next? You know, because what people are going to want, including what MLK called the white moderates, which I think is about 80% of white people, not overtly racist, not burning crosses, don't have hatred toward, but would far prefer to not pay attention, be indifferent, doesn't really affect them. And it's kind of like, oh, we're protesting again. We just protested. We got the Senate bill through. Oh, what is traditionally that's been the reaction of the middle 80% that will slide in the right direction just enough for us to get something done. And then we'll be like, we did it. And we'll slide right back, you know, climb right back on the fence. And that's really, we talk about change. That's the change we need. We need white moderates who joined us to stay with us. Right? They're going to pass something in the Congress. It's going to be a little bit better. It's not going to fix the problem. And when people continue to protest and take direct action, and that'll be the first time in history that white moderates stayed with the cause. So I'm watching carefully to see if we just pressed, you know. So I don't know. I'm now officially soliloquying, so I apologize about that.
Oh, sure. I'm digging it, man. I'm digging it.
well, yeah, we're doing these things. We're not doing these things for each other.
Yeah.
We're doing these things hoping that somehow, some way, they're going to be widely viewed by enough white people to make a difference. Because I really do believe that if white people can collectively accept that these issues are definitely not isolated, they remain pervasive. If white people can look at the reaction to John Carlos and Tommy Smith in '68, with Colin Kaepernick in 2014, and see the stark similarities, and realize we have not made as much progress as we insist on giving ourselves credit for, right? If we can take that deep, long, uncomfortable look in the mirror and accept how things actually are, then I need to believe that we'll feel righteously compelled to participate in, consistently participate in continuous piecemeal solutions until we finally get this thing all the way right over what unfortunately is going to be another number of decades. So
Yeah.
I wonder what else you got on your mind, Coach.
I mean, that's about, that's the gist, it's just, yeah, like I said, hopeful, but like you just said, we've got a long, long, long way to go, but as long as we keep seeing change, and what it's going to take, like you said, more and more white people have got to, stay in the fight. They've got to stay in the fight to make this thing right. And just got to keep on pushing forward.
Well, Coach David Peavy with Duncanville, I appreciate your time very much and sharing your thoughts, and we will certainly stay in touch. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.